Hey gang, and welcome to this tutorial in which I'm going to show you how to get up and running with JSON server. So then, first up, what is JSON server? Well, JSON server is a package that we can install on our computer with npm. So you're going to need Node installed in order to use it. To do that, go to nodejs.org and just download it. And basically, this package allows us to easily create a dummy local REST API to mimic a backend for development and prototyping. So instead of having to set up a whole backend API with a database and endpoints, we can just create a simple JSON file to store our data. And then the JSON server will take that file and wrap it with API endpoints on a local server for us to interact with. So we can send GET requests, POST requests, delete, patch, etc. to these different endpoints to interact with the JSON file. So it's a really quick way to get up and running with a dummy REST API to quickly develop and prototype websites without having to get bogged down with a backend to begin with. So in this tutorial, what I'm going to do is show you how to install JSON server and get up and running with it by creating a very simple blog project like this, where we can list all the blogs, see the details, we can delete blogs, and we can add new blogs as well as search for blogs right here. So I'm going to show you how to do all of this and also how to interact with the different API endpoints in order to sort, order, and query data as well. Now, before you do start, I would suggest that you already have a basic to decent understanding of JavaScript, how to interact with the DOM, and also how to use asynchronous code. Now, if you don't, then definitely check out my modern JavaScript course right here on YouTube and my asynchronous JavaScript course as well. The links to both of these are going to be down below. And if you want to delve a bit deeper into JavaScript, I've got a whole Udemy course on modern JavaScript. It's about 20 hours long. So the link to this is going to be down below as well. I'm also going to be using Visual Studio Code, and you can download that editor right here, code.visualstudio.com, for free. And I will be using a package for VS Code called Live Server so that I can preview the website in a browser. So if you want to install that, go to extensions right here, and then you want to search up here for Live Server. So it's this package right here. Just click the install button, and then you'll be able to right click any HTML file and open it up using a live server. So I've already created a small little starter project right here. It's dead simple. There's 3 different HTML files. We have an index file, and this is just a nav with an h1 and a link in it. And then down here we have a div with a class of blogs. This is where we're going to inject some kind of blogs template from our JavaScript file when we fetch that data later on. And then at the bottom, it's linked to an index JavaScript file, which is inside the JS folder right here. So each one of these different pages is linked to its own JavaScript file. So that's the index page, the home page, which will list the blogs and also have this very simple nav on it as well. Now this goes to /create.html, and that is this page right here, just an h1 and a form. And inside that form, we have a text input for the blog title and a text area for the blog body, and then a button to create it. Again, we're linking to a JavaScript file, this time the create one right here. And then finally, the details page, which is when we click on a single blog on the home page right here. It's going to take us to a details page for that blog and list all of the blog content. Just a div right here with a class of details. It's empty, and again we're going to inject some blog details, a template in there later on once we fetch that from the database inside this JavaScript file details.js. Okay, so that's dead simple so far. Now they're all as well linked up to this style sheet, styles.css, where we have some very basic styles. So if I go to the top, we can see we've got a custom font from Google Fonts. Then in the body itself, just a background color, font family, color of the text, a max width of 960 pixels, a margin 100 pixels top and bottom, auto left and right, so we have a central column, a bit of padding. The nav we're displaying as flex and spreading out the content left to right. The H1 inside the nav has got a margin of 0. Then we're just styling the anchor tag to make it look like a button inside the nav. The form, a max width, and then just some styles to make the input and text area look a bit nicer as well. Okay, so very simple styles. Now, the JavaScript files over here, these are all empty to begin with, and this is what we're going to be working with to send fetch requests to our data later on, okay? But for now, let's just preview this in a browser by right-clicking and going to open with live server. And remember, to do this, you need that live server package installed. So if I do that, we can see this is the index page. That's the title and the link to add a new blog, which I can click, and we can see that form right here. And if I go to details.html, we should see the details page, which at the minute is blank because, like I said, we just have the empty div at the minute, and we're going to dynamically inject the blog details later once we grab those from our data in the JavaScript file. Now you can get all of those starter files I just showed you from GitHub, where I've uploaded them to this repo right here, JSON server tutorial. Now you just need to select the starter files branch from the branch drop down right here. So this is the starter website I just showed you. Once you've selected that branch, go to this green button right here that says code, and then you can download the zip folder. Once you've extracted that, you can just open that folder up in VS Code. Now, I also have the final files as well, which is the finished project. And to see those, you just need to select the final files branch, and all of that code is right here. So again, you can download the zip folder for that branch as well. So next up then, let's install the JSON server package. So before you can install JSON Server, you need to also install Node.js onto your computer as well. And that's because we're going to use the Node Package Manager, or NPM for short, to install the live server package. So you can get Node from nodejs.org, and you want to download the latest version right here and just run through the install wizard. Now, once you've done that, it's dead simple to install JSON Server. So I'm just on the NPM page for the JSON Server package. And by the way, this link is going to be down below in the description. And if we scroll down, we should see how to install it. And it's just this command right here, npm install -g, meaning we're installing this package globally on our computer and we can use it anywhere thereafter. And then the package name, which is JSON Server. So you want to grab all that and copy it. And inside a terminal, doesn't matter what terminal you use, you can use command prompt if you're on Windows. I'm using one called Windows Terminal, which you can also download for free as well. And I'm just going to paste this in. It doesn't matter what directory you're in because we're installing this globally on our computer. So just press enter to install that, and it's going to install the latest version for you. And as long as you don't see any error messages, it should now be installed on your computer. Okay then, so now we have JSON Server installed onto our computer. We need to make a JSON file for our data so that then JSON Server can watch that data file and wrap it with API endpoints that we can interact with. Now, when I do this in a project, I generally do it inside some kind of data folder at the root level. So let me create that. You don't have to put it in a data folder. I'm just trying to keep things organized. And then I'm going to create a new file called db, which stands for database.json. And again, you don't need to call this db. That's just what I call it. Okay. So if you're unfamiliar with JSON, it stands for JavaScript Object Notation, and we use it to pass data back and forth between a client and a server. And it looks very much like a JavaScript object, but there is a subtle difference. So whereas in JavaScript, object keys are not typically wrapped in double quotes like this, in JSON they are. And also string values must be wrapped in double quotes as well, and not single quotes like that. That would be invalid JSON. Now, when we're making a JSON file for JSON Server, we do it in a very specific way. So we start with our curly braces, which is how the JSON file starts, and then any top level properties inside this are going to be seen as specific resources by JSON Server. For example, if I make a property called posts like this, then JSON Server will see this as a resource, a bit like a table in a SQL database or a collection in a NoSQL database. Now, each resource value should be an array of items. So inside here, we can do an array of items like this. So each item in our case could represent a single item, a single blog post, right? Now, each resource item needs to have a unique ID property first of all. So let's create that. We'll say ID, and oops, remember it needs to be in double quotes like this. And the value of this one is just going to be 1. And we can then apply some different properties that we want to give to each post. So I'm going to do a title property for each post, and this post is going to have a title of welcome to the new blog, like so. And remember, strings are double quotes, and then we're also going to have a body, so the actual content of the blog. And for this, I'm going to use some lorem ipsum, or should I say ninja ipsum. So I'm going to grab all of this stuff right here and copy that, and then I'm going to come over here and paste it right here. Okay, so we have the body now. And then finally, I'm going to do a property called likes. Oops, I think I've forgotten my comma at the end of all of this right here. Yep, I need the comma. And then the likes is going to be a number, and we'll just say 30 likes for this post. Okay, so that there is a single post inside this array, and we can have as many different posts as we like. So this is a bit like a single record in a SQL database, or it would be like a document in a NoSQL database. All right, so let's add in a few more. I'm going to copy that and paste it down here a couple of times, and we'll say ID is 2 and ID is 3 for this one. For the title of the second one, I'll just say how to be a net ninja, right? And then the number of likes is going to be 15. And then for this one down here, I'm going to call that new view course coming soon, like so. And the likes on this one is going to be 20. All right, so we can take off the comma of the last item. If we leave that on, it's going to error because that would not be valid JSON. The last item shouldn't have a comma after it. Okay, so now we have right here a single resource type called post, which is an array with 3 items inside it. So essentially 3 records inside it, right? Now, inside this JSON file, when we're working with JSON Server, we can have as many different resources as we want. So if, for example, we wanted to have a resource called polls, then we could do. So it's another top level property like this after the array, and this in itself would be an array. And we could then add in different items for each poll. So I'm just going to paste one in like this, and it would have an ID, and this has to be unique within the resource. So it doesn't matter that the ID of this is 1 and the ID of this is 1, because they're different resources, okay? It must only be unique inside that particular resource. So we have an ID, and then for this poll, a question, answer A and answer B. Now, we're not going to work with polls. I just wanted to show you that we can have more than one resource type inside this file. So now our database JSON file contains 2 types of resources, right? Blogs and polls. The next step is to run JSON Server and have it watch this file. And when we do that, JSON Server is then going to generate API endpoints for each of these different resources, posts and polls. And it's going to do that using a local server. Now, to do this, we need to open up a terminal. So come to terminal and go to new terminal, and make sure you're in the project directory right here. In my case, JSON Server Tutorial. And we need to run JSON-server. That is the package name that we installed. And then -- watch. And this is how we watch a JSON file, then a space, and then the path and the file name. So we need to go into the data folder /db.json. So we press enter, and that is going to watch this JSON file right here. And it's going to give us access to API endpoints to interact with those resources. So we can see right here that we have localhost port 3000. That's the server it's serving these from. And for the posts resource, we have /posts. So we'd send a GET request to get all of the posts. And for polls, it's /polls. So what I'm going to do is open one of these different endpoints in a browser. So let me do that like so, and we can see we get back all of the JSON right here just for the posts when we go to /posts. If I try the polls, then we're just going to get back the poll. So that's pretty nice, right? Now, normally we wouldn't use these addresses and go to those in the browser. We'd make a fetch request to these endpoints from our JavaScript to then get all of that data and do something with it. Typically, we'd probably inject it in some kind of HTML template. So we're going to do that next. Okay then, so now we have JSON Server watching our db.json file, and it's serving those resources up at these endpoints right here. Now what I'd like to do is from our JavaScript on the home page, the index, so inside the index.js, which is what is linked to from this page right here. In here, I want to fetch all of those posts, and then once we have those posts, output them in the web page, so right here, okay? So there's a few steps to do this. The first thing I need to do is attach an event listener to the window to wait until the DOM content is loaded, because we want to wait until the web page is ready before we then go out and get the posts and render them to the page. So let me first of all paste this in. I'm taking the window object, adding an event listener, DOM content loaded, so when all of the DOM content is loaded in the browser, and at that point we fire a function which inside is then invoking a render posts function. Now the reason I'm wrapping this in an arrow function like this is because I don't want to automatically pass in the event object to render posts. If I just did this like so, then this would automatically take in as an argument the event object, and I don't want it to get that because I'm not going to use it. So instead I'm wrapping it in a function so that when we invoke this, it doesn't get that event object, okay? So that's the first thing. The next thing we want to do is actually create this function. So I'm going to say const and then render posts and set that equal to an asynchronous function. Now again, if you don't know much about async and await or anything like that, then definitely check out my asynchronous JavaScript tutorial on YouTube. The link is down below. Anyway, inside this function, what do we want to do? Well, first of all, we want to create some kind of URI that we're going to make a request to. So let me say let URI and set that equal to a string. Now remember, we want to make a request to this thing right here. So I'm going to copy that and paste it right here like so. And to begin with, that's all we need. That is our endpoint. So we want to send a GET request to this endpoint. Now I'm going to use the fetch API in order to do this. So let me now say const and res, which stands for response, is equal to await and then fetch, and we want to go to the URI. So we're going to fetch the resources from this endpoint, and then JSON server is going to send us that data back. Okay, so it's going to wait here until we get the data back, the response back, and the response is then stored in this constant. Now this response in itself is not the data. When we use the fetch API, it's a response object, and in order to get the data off that, the post that we want, we have to say const, and then I'm going to call this posts since that's the data we're getting, and set that equal to await and then the response object dot JSON. So we have this JSON method which takes the response object and passes the data from it into a JavaScript object from the JSON. All right. Now this is asynchronous. It takes a little time to do, and that's why we use await right here, so that we wait here, and then when it's done, we store all of that data inside posts. Okay. So to begin with, let us just log those to the console, console.log, and we want to log the posts just to make sure this works. All right, save it, and let's go over here, open up the console, zoom in a little bit, and we can see this array right here. So this is successfully working. We now have this array of 3 posts. So now we have those, we want to just output them in the DOM. So how are we going to do this? Well, I'm going to create a template string. So first of all, I'm going to say let template equal to an empty string to begin with. Then I'm going to take the posts and I'm going to use the for each method on those posts. So it's going to cycle through them and fire a callback function for each post. And each time we fire that callback function, we get access to the current post we're iterating. Okay? So first the first one, then the second, then the third, and so forth. Now for each post, I want to generate a bit of template and tack it on to this thing right here. So adding on a post template each time around. So I'm going to take that template variable and say plus equals, which means append to it. And this time I'm going to use a template string, which is backticks. And the reason I'm using a template string is so we can output variables inside the template string using $sign curly braces. This is how we output a dynamic variable inside a template string. So I'm going to start this template off by creating a div, and that's going to have a class of post, like so. And the reason I'm giving it that class is so we can style it later on. So that's the first div. Then inside that, I want an h2 for the title. So let me create that. And inside the h2, we can output the variable. So $, curly braces, we get access to the post, which is the item, if I inspect, that we have inside. Let me go to the console. Inside this array. So we're cycling through this. It's going to be this, then this, then this. So we have the title property on that, as well as the body and the ID and the likes. Okay. So all I want to do is output the different properties from that post each time we cycle. So I'm going to take the post and output the title right here. After the title, I want to do a paragraph tag. And inside that, I'll do a small tag to make the text smaller. And I'm going to output the likes. So $, curly braces, post.likes. And then after that, I'll say likes, because this is just a number. So if I don't do that, it will just say like 35 or 40. So we need to say that they are likes after that. Close off the small tag and close off the p tag. And then after that, I want to do a bit of the body, not all of the body, just a bit of it. So we're going to use the slice method on the body. Let me create a p tag and we'll close that off as well. And inside, we want our $ curly brace, like so. We want to take the post, then we want the body, and then we're going to slice it, which lets us get a substring, if you like, and we're going to start at position 0 in the string and go to position 200. So that's going to basically get the first 200 characters and output them. Okay, so a small section of the body, like a preview. And then after that, we're going to do an anchor tag with an href, and that is going to go to details.html. Okay, so if we click on a read more ... link, then it's going to go to the details page for that block. Now we're going to make this a little different later on this link because we want it to be a specific post that we see the details of. But for now, let's just keep it at details. And that is pretty much it. That's all I want to do. So we have that string now for each post. It's going to append to that string. So by the end of it, we should have 3 of these all in one string. Now we want to take this div right here, blogs, and we want to inject that template into the blogs, right? So let me now do that. I'm going to come down here after the for each, and I want to get this thing first of all. So let me do a query selector at the top. I'm just going to copy and paste this from my repo, so you don't have to watch me type it out. Paste it in. So I'm saying the container is equal to the blogs, and I use query selector to get that. So that is this thing. And then down here, I can take that container and I can say the inner HTML is equal to the template variable, which we have right here. Okay, so all of this stuff. Save that. And now if we take a look, we can see all of that blog data. If I refresh, it's going to load again. So everything is working fine. Now, I do also just want to add a tiny bit of CSS to make it look a little bit better. And I'm just going to paste this in from my repo. So let me paste that in right here. Dead simple. We're just giving each post a bit of padding and a background color and border radius and a margin. Then stripping out the margin of the H2, stripping out the margin top of the paragraph tags, and then coloring the link as well. So dead simple. And if we take a look now, it looks a bit better. So that's how we get all of a single resource using JSON Server. We just send a GET request to the endpoint for that resource. It sends us back the data as an array of objects, and then we can do what we want with those objects. In our case, we've just output them to the DOM. So that's how we get all of the posts. But what if we want to get just a single post, like the post with the ID of 2 or 3? We'll see how to do that next. So currently each post right here has a link to go to the details page on read more, and if I click on this it goes to the details page. But how do we know what the details are of that blog post when there's nothing here saying what blog post we've clicked? There's nothing up here in the address bar to say that we have the blog with an ID of 2 or 3 or anything else. So how do we make that call? Well, what I'm going to do is use query parameters. So instead of just outputting the details.html, I'm also going to add a query parameter at the end of this. And we do that by using a question mark first of all, and then a key value pair. So the key is going to be the ID, and the value is going to be a variable which we can output, and that is the ID of the post. So post.id. Remember, in our data, we have the ID, all right? So if we save this now and preview again, if we hover over these, you should see in the bottom left the link is updated. If I click on one, we can see now ID is 1. If we click on this, ID is 2. So we can now access this right here, this query parameter value inside the details JavaScript page right here. Now, the way we do this is by creating a new URL search params object. So let me just paste this in. I'm saying const ID is equal to a new URL search params object, and I'm passing in window location.search. And this value right here is this value right here. So starting at the question mark all the way to the end. So any query parameters in that bit of string is going to be picked up inside this value. Now, we just want this value right here too. So in order to get that, once we've passed that into this URL search params object, we just say .get and then pass in the key that we want the value of. So in our case, the ID, like so. And now this value 2 or 3, if we click the other block, or 1, is going to be stored inside this constant. So now we have that, we can use it to generate an endpoint to send a request to JSON server to get that particular block. So again, the first thing I'm going to do is wait for the DOM content to load. So let me paste this in, take the window, add an event listener, DOM content loaded, fire a function, which then fires this render details function. And again, the reason I'm putting it in this arrow function right here is so I don't automatically take the event object, because I don't need it in this function. So let me now create this function, const render details, set that equal to an async function. And then inside here, the first thing I'm going to do is say const res is equal to fetch, and we want to fetch a single item now. Now, how do we do that? What does the endpoint look like for a single resource? Remember, to get all of them, it's just / the resource name. Now, to get a single one, we take this right here. So let's paste that inside a string inside fetch. And then we say / whatever the ID is of the resource or the item that we want to get. So it's going to look at this property right here, which is why we need this ID property. So we have access to that now. It's right here, so I can just tack that on by saying plus ID. All right, so now this is the endpoint to get a single item. And remember, we need to say await because this is asynchronous. And then after that, we want to pass that. So let me say const, and we want the post, so let's call it post, is equal to await, and then the response object .json, like so. Okay, so now we have that. And if you want, we could log that to the console.log post to see it first of all, save it. And if I come over here and open up the console, then we can see we have an object, and we can see the ID is 2. It matches this thing up here, and we have the rest of the properties, the body, the likes, and the title. All right, so now we just need to output that stuff to the DOM. So same as before, we're going to create a string template. This time we don't need to cycle through the posts because we only have one of them. So I'm going to say const template is equal to a template string, and then inside we'll do an h1 for the title. So let's output that, post.title, and close the h1. And then I also just want to output a paragraph tag for the body. So curly braces and post.body, like so. All right, and that's all I want to do. So that's the template. Now we need to output it. So we need to first get a handle of this thing right here, which is where we want to output it. So again, I'm just going to copy this from my repo because I'm super lazy and paste it right here. So we have a container again, and that is the details class. And then down here, I can just say container.inner HTML is equal to the template that we've created right here. Awesome. Okay, so let me now save that and check this out in a browser. I'm going to refresh, and I don't think something is working. Let me see what the problem is. template is not defined. Of course it's not. It should be template. Save it and come over here, and now we see the blog details. So if I go to a different one, welcome to the new blog, we see that, and let me try out the third one. Cool, all working. So that, my friends, is how we get a single record or single item inside a resource. It's / the resource name / the ID of that resource.